Welcome to the Success Consultancy's Just Great People podcast, the podcast that introduces you to ordinary people who've done extraordinary things. My name is Barry Eustace, and I'd like to introduce you to today's guest. Hi, everybody. It's Barry Eustace here again from the Just Great People podcast. I'm delighted to have Charlotte Storey here joining me today to tell you about her amazing life, how she's gone from Midsummer's Night Dream to at the old vic at Bristol to helping people take and control their inner self and create mastery. Controlling inner self, particularly during public speaking, can often be difficult, and Charlotte has the remedy for that as well. So without further ado from me, Charlotte, over to you. Please do tell us all about yourself.
Well, I run an organisation called Leader Empowerment, and essentially I found myself really working almost exclusively in aviation, which was never the intention, but it was very much the dream. And sometimes you have to be careful what you wish for, don't you? And it's to cut a very long story short, I picked up a disability, a considerable one, in 2008. I had my shoulder completely removed, so I have no anatomy between the shoulder and the elbow. So having come from a really dexterous life as a professional musician, I was playing with people like Van Morrison and Rod Stewart and Natalie Cole, doing really major tours and recordings and live performances with those sorts of individuals. And suddenly I had this extremely radical event where I lost the ability to dress myself and look after myself. And so suddenly, from doing that really big stuff, became very introverted, had to go back home to my parents because, I had to learn how to do loads of stuff again. And my dad said to me, look, you've got two choices when this sort of thing happens to you. You can look at the dirt or you can look at the stars. What do you want to do? Is there any stuff in your life that you feel you haven't really achieved? And yeah, I've been really lucky. I've lived the life I've really loved. So performing arts has always been the job that I did career one. So I didn't really know what to be and who to be and what to actually find challenging or fulfilling anymore. So my dad said, is there anything you want to do? And I said, well, I think I want to go back and teach. I want to go and teach in university. So I took over a lectureship in Plymouth, at the University of Plymouth, and some really brilliant research colleagues there helped me to invent a robotic elbow that enabled me to play, to some really poor degree, but nevertheless to play again the saxophone. And I was really interested in that, how you embody yourself again when there are huge bits of you missing. And for me, it was physical, but it really impacted on the psychological. And I used to be able to feel that I could walk into a room, and make some kind of impact. That's what actors are taught to do, to just enter, to take and to hold space. And when you've got most of your upper body missing, it just felt like that was a really lame offer. So I had lots of reprogramming to do in terms of my view of myself. So this robotic elbow enabled me to play some very, very amateur saxophone again, but I just thought, well, actually there's a lot in this business of rebuilding yourself. Funding disappeared for all of that when we left the European Union, and then Brexit came. Then lockdown came, didn't it? Close on the heels of Brexit, two terrible things. And so, my university role receded and changed, and I thought, I don't really want to be here anymore. What do I really want to do? How can I really help people? And I'd started to rebuild my own sense of self through that opportunity to perform once again. And I thought, well, obviously I need to be in front of people doing things. So my dad said to me, what sort of ambitions do you still have? And I said, I'd really love to fly. And it had been something that had featured quite strongly all throughout my life in little sort of tempting doses, people who did fly that I knew, or people, traveling around in quite glamorous aeroplanes as a professional musician and an actor. And I thought, I just quite like to be a pilot in command for myself. But of course, I'd lost the use of my right arm entirely by that point. And it seemed impossible. So I applied for a flying scholarship and won one, and then had to work out how to fly with just the one hand. And as an airline pilot yourself, that probably is quite a challenging thing to learn to do. But with the brilliant input of wonderful disabled flying charities, it was eventually possible. And I qualified in 2021, got my light aircraft pilot's license in 2021. And I'm one of the very few people, I think, that flies with one arm. Certainly the only woman I know on the professional speaking circuit anyway that does it. So that really helped me to think, okay, well, regardless of what's taken away from you, you can still begin to rebuild yourself and to start to love and approve of what's left. And in so doing, I ended up chatting to people who fly planes, who wanted to know how I did it just with the one hand. And then they just were really impressed by the way that I could take and hold space still, as a person that is actually quite disabled. So I just made some offers. I made some offers to go in and train sales teams and to work particularly with women in business. You know, women go back to work sometimes after significant career breaks, after children, and go back to much more diminutive roles than they ever occupied before they went on maternity leave. And there's this kind of back foot apology that women have when they return to the workplace. Oh, I'm sorry I had the children, you know, sorry that I didn't have a continuous career. And it was just really great fun to help them use actor skills, because I have this little strap line, you know, that all business is show business. So the skills that I've got as an actor who's trodden the boards, you know, for 30 years, or has trained other people to do it, as I'm a professional acting coach's, you know, career too. It's really amazingly interesting to see how those very fundamental skills of taking and holding space can really transform people's lives. And I just love it. You know, in a day of work, I can see people taken from zero to hero in terms of their self-belief and their ability just to walk into a room and to hold it. So it's great. I just love it. So I'm still acting every day. I'm still teaching people how to do acting, but I'm just not working with actors full time. So it's great. I'm loving it.
Not quite hitting the low B flat on the sax with as much precision as you were previously.
None of that going on. No.
Disclosure, folks. I used to play. Well, I still play the alto, to be honest. But anyway, that's another story. One bad album later. Anyway, that's another story. I mean, fantastic sort of recovery from a potentially definitely life-changing event. But it could be an event that could, as you say, could have had you looking at the dirt rather than the stars. Where did that inner fortitude come to make that conscious decision to look upwards, not down? Where did that resolve come, and how did you find it?
I think if you asked my friends, they would say, you know, there's that inner show off in you that just needs to carry on performing. Yes. But I would take a more sage view of that and say that my father was disabled. You know, I grew up with a dad who had a really significant spinal injury, and life was really hard. You know, there was no money because of it, and there was a lot of friction in the house because my mum was having to work all of the time, and, you know, my dad was struggling. So I saw his fortitude through that, and he was always incredibly dignified through his whole early career, as I call it a career, being a disabled person, because it is. You have to take a whole view of how you're going to direct yourself through that career of being a disabled person. And he always did it with such incredible intellectual curiosity. He was always curious about how you carry on and how the mind aligns itself with that changeful potency of physical alteration. So I was always really seduced by that, I think. And I've always been really blessed with a ridiculously optimistic personality. So I just think, I thought, well, never say never. You know, I've wanted to fly all my life. And I've never had the time. So here's the time, because no one's employing me. I got a job. You know, no one employs. Well, people tend not to employ disabled people. And it's hard to find work as a one-handed saxophonist and as a one-handed actor. I mean, the world's changed a way, even in the last, you know, since lockdown, the world's really changed, you know, and I'm thrilled to say that when I talk about diversity and inclusion, which I do as a professional speaker, I wouldn't have been able to say the things that I say to a receptive crowd even 5 years ago. You know, the world post-lockdown has really altered. You know, our embracing of diversity is now incredibly changed, and that's a great thing. So I'm doing what I can do just to show people that, okay, when bits and pieces go astray, you can still keep your life on target. Because I started with the end in mind. I was going to fly. And sitting in that aircraft, sitting in a Piper Alpha 28, couldn't reach the thruster, couldn't do that. Sitting in a Cessna 152, couldn't reach all the instruments on the cockpit until an amazing woman, Fiona Luckhurst, who's very senior in the British Microlight Aircraft Association, said to me, "You're sitting in the wrong seat. You can't sit in the seat the pilot sits in. You'll have to sit in the instructor seat. So sit on the starboard side and sit in this little Icarus C-42. It's only 425 kilos, you know, fully loaded. And it's going to be light, so it's not going to be something you have to struggle with. But the throttle is between your knees. And of course, then I only have to put my dead hand onto it and shift my weight backwards and forwards. I just have to find a way of sticking myself to it and then just moving my upper body backwards and forwards. And then bingo, you know, the plane could lift off and come down again.
So on your show reel, which is fantastic. Folks, if you haven't seen Charlotte's show reel, watch it. It's brilliant. And I noticed you're in the right-hand seat. And thank you for the explanation. What a great explanation. You've gone out now and you're inspiring people. And I love the bit about killing your inner assassin. That's the person who, in all of us, who's got the knife out when you need it least. How does that translate? Because presumably now the people can relate to the fact that you've faced massive adversity and yet bounced back with alacrity and into a completely different direction, and are inspirational in what you do and what you say and how you deliver it.
Well, I think physical disability is easy to understand because you can see it. But when your disability, and I'm using that as a very broad term, is internal, when you are assuaged by that inner assassin, and I use that phrase and I borrowed it from someone else, and I can't think where it came from, but I have shoplifted it. I didn't make that phrase myself. I just thought it's nicer than shitty committee, isn't it? But it's the same sort of idea that we get the knives or the guns out. I always say it sort of blows your head off. And I'd had really significant episodes as an actor of self-doubt. So it transfers itself very visibly in front of an audience into stage fright. I had a terrible event on stage one night when things didn't quite go right. Something awful happened. Some lights fell down from a lighting rig. And it just took me by such terrible surprise that they put the house lights on. And I'd realised that for the first time in my acting career, there were about 2,000 people sitting in front of me, and they were all looking at me, and something horrible had gone wrong, and I wasn't in control. So my whole strategy of self-mastery is about saying, okay, things are going to go wrong. That's life, isn't it? The organic sequence of every day is that things don't go quite as you planned. So it's just having those self-belief strategies. It's about love and approval, and not in a self-admiring, self-congratulating way, but in a sense that stuff is not going to always go really very well for me, but that's only a very fractional part of what goes on for me today. The other stuff where people reflect love towards me and I'm able to have that opportunity of that communion with other human souls, they're the glorious moments of the day, aren't they? Not when someone, throws their hand on the horn and says, "You idiot," as it happened to me this morning in traffic. And I was really upset by it. But then I just thought to myself, I'm not going to let that tiny little interlude ruin the rest of my day. It's about reframing, really. And self-mastery is all about accepting that which goes wrong as readily as we do all the stuff that's great and makes us feel good.
So when our dear listener or viewer finds himself on a stage with a dry mouth and no ability to speak and 1,000-mile vision where they're staring at a wall not knowing where it's coming from, how do they get to the next phase where they actually get into flow and are able to overcome what is clearly a panic attack, isn't it? It is essentially a panic attack.
Well, we start to close down our horizons when we think that being in front of an audience is about us. Because actually we're just a conduit. We're just there to commune with the audience. And I don't use communication because I think I always say to my clients that communication is, I hate the word amateur, but it is. It's for amateurs, isn't it? Because you can teach anybody to communicate. It's basically sending a signal, understanding that it's been received, and you'll know it's been received when it comes back or you get some kind of feedback, good or bad. But when you're standing in front of an audience and you're in that flow state of communion, you are thinking about the audience's experience. And the audience of experiences of you, it should just be that you are literally a channel for a message to be given. And it's a lot of training. I work with the Royal Marines Band, and they called on me, quite some time ago now. I've been working with them for a very long time. They called on me when lots of dear soldiers were being repatriated from Helmand. And often those dear buglers, the corps of drums, were repatriating these bodies, and often they knew the person in the box, and that, I can't imagine how difficult that was. And we did a lot of work on trying to think about the communion of that, the bugle call over the body. It's an act of love, and it's an act of communion, and we all know the tune. And of course, when you're blowing into a valveless instrument with a body full of emotion and tension, then the outcome of that message is not going to be the one that we intend to give. It's going to be about us. So there's a lesson here, I think, about empathy and sympathy, because we wrestle the message back to ourselves. And when we do that, we're not doing the job of thinking about audience experience. It's a whole suite of work, this. That's my sort of short circuit explanation of it. But, I work with a team that played over the Queen's body, for example, at the royal funeral. And also they do the fanfare trumpeting for coronations and royal weddings, and it's a precise art. You can't afford to have physical tension. And the difficulty of working with a military band, of course, is that they have to have a physical shape as well. They can't just play off of the back foot in a casual jazz fashion that I would have done. I'm a rock and pop player primarily. And I would just step onto the back foot, open up my spine, and then the big vox would come out of the instrument. But here you have to do the regimented shaping. So it's creating freedom within shape. So without physical tension, but giving the impression of the form. So all of those things, just an awareness of isolating physical tension and understanding how to work through it and with it and sometimes against it, are the secrets really to unlocking that. It won't happen organically. It has to happen through retraining your brain and your body. They work together.
Like any instrument, the frustration of learning an instrument, and I can attest to that. Listener with my saxophone and my guitar. It's a relentless, endless process, isn't it? It's about continuous personal development, and actually getting that. We're having a discussion with another guest about dealing with Olympic athletes, stripping back to the basics, getting the basics back absolutely sorted and identified and sorted, and then building from there.
It's interesting you say that, but what you said there about foundation is critical, because I always say to people, if you've gripped your little toe your big toe rather, if you've gripped that into the floor, you're finished. Because it's like a little bird hanging onto a branch. As soon as there's tension in your big toe at the very base of your scaffold, that is it. You'll never recover. So As soon as you can talk to your toe and release it on the floor and put your weight through your heels rather than having your weight anxiously forwards, you'll be able to free the diaphragm, because everything else then assembles itself nicely and gravidly over that heel. So as soon as your weight assignation is in the wrong place and you're not aligned, there's no way of helping you.
And is it the same with shoulders as well?
Shoulders, that will all follow. Absolutely. It's like a fire that goes all the way up through the body. So the toe locks in, and then the knees go, and then the bum cheeks clench, and then the diaphragm can't move because the ribs can't swing to throw the sort of vacuum to allow the air to come in. The shoulders lock, so the ribs have no chance, and then the jaw tenses, and then the thumbs start to tuck in, and eventually we'll faint because the body is not able to recruit any kind of oxygen. But it starts with your big toe. So if you do one thing today, folks, tune into your big toe when you stand on the stage and think, right, I'm going to relax it and put my weight back into the heels, you've got a better chance of being able to get that first breath in. And we all know that without the breath coming in, there's no recovery of information, because oxygen provides that super highway to retrieve information from the brain.
Yeah, and the voice.
And the voice.
Interesting. The simulator, when you do look at videos of people in the simulator, when it gets tense, the shoulders move forward. There are physiological indicators of acute stress. And let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. I've been there and know what it's like. And so the big toe technique, you heard it from Charlotte.
That's it. You did. I actually I flew the Gulfstream G500 simulator actually at Flight Safety International a couple of months ago, and they were just wondering if it was possible for a disabled pilot to fly that simulator, because there's an auto throttle on it, you can program it, So they did the whole thing, flew me up to 50,000 feet, and then did a sort of an emergency recovery procedure, where it comes down to 15,000 feet, and then it turns 90-degree angle to tell the people at the air traffic control that you're not conscious. To bring you down with a missile. But I was able to land it, on the airstrip, and to bring it down. I was simulating a flight actually between Zurich and Sion. My brother lives in Sion, so I thought, fly somewhere I know. And you're absolutely right. When I look at the video of myself, because it was filmed from behind, I can see my shoulders coming up,
Well, in fact, absolutely. The Airbus A320 simulator, if you get down these parts, we'll see if we can get in the Airbus A320 simulator. There's one about 4 miles from us. But the great thing about the Airbus 320 and the entire Airbus series is the thrust levers don't move. It's got auto thrust, and you've got fly-by-wire side stick. So right-hand seat would work perfectly.
Oh, brilliant.
Left-hand seat.
Should we prove that then, Barry?
Yeah, we should do that. Yes, exactly.
Work through a suite of planes.
Yeah, I'll talk to the boys at 320 Aviation, see what we can do. We could video it. Your work has that neat little segue, folks, into your work has taken you into business aviation and helping them to present more effectively and communicate and commune more effectively. Is that correct, Charlotte?
That's absolutely right, yes. The first professional outing I had for the European Business Aviation Association came from a lovely man called Paul Walsh, who approached me online and just said, it'd be really interesting to get you as a disabled pilot to speak at our annual conference. So I went to Brussels and did that for them back in March. And then it's been a snowball really ever since then. And I've got lots of interesting work coming up, and have done recently some very interesting things spoke obviously at flight safety, and one of the things that they did with me was flying that lovely simulator. And they've become, great friends. People have been very, very loving towards me, actually, not in a patronising way, but in a really lovely, supportive way. And it's a small world, business aviation, so they've been very generous in sharing their friends. I'm working for Guardian Jet, going out to Aix-les-Bains a little bit later in November to work with women in business aviation. And I've spoken several times at the House of Commons at aviation events where we're applauding the initiatives like the Equal Skies Charter, trying to get aviation to understand that disabled people have unique problem-solving skills, not just as pilots, but as plane designers and as people involved in aviation technology in general. So they've been lovely things to do. In addition, speaking at NATS, I'm about to go and speak at the Civil Aviation Authority. I'm doing a couple of days for Gulfstream, at their annual general conference. So it's nice to be popular. Obviously, people will get bored of me at some point, I imagine. But it's lovely to be working. Well, I hope not. No, because I love the work. And what's lovely is being able to get people to understand that it's play. Selling anything is playful. When you're listening to an audience and you've got that lovely dynamic communion going on, it's about focusing on what the audience needs and then just shadowing physical gesture and just making people feel comfortable, through that dynamic listening. And that's Greek chorus work. If you've got a mask on and you've got 14 people lined up behind you in a kind of triangular configuration, which is the shape of a Greek chorus, you've got to trust each other because you've got no peripheral vision. So you've got to have each other's backs, and it's teaching them those sorts of dynamic chorus skills. I'm a chorus director. So that's what I'm really skilled at. And who thought, that Greek chorus, who thought that Euripides would have a place in business aviation sales, selling £56 million worth of jet? But it does. It's a hugely important skill to transfer.
And that mutual exchange of energy between, again, when you're communing correctly, is heady, isn't it? It's addictive. It's exciting. It's motivating, and it's fun, isn't it? Because you're actually communing and enjoying the same things, and you're feeding off each other, and it's this virtual circle. Or am I missing the point? I think that's my experience.
Well, it shouldn't feel like work. It's that beautiful interplay, isn't it, between two human souls that are passionate about the same thing. So if you start with the end in mind that you want to, let's say, sell a plane and someone else wants to buy one, then you're already on the same page, aren't you? And then it's just a creative compromise about how I get what I want by giving you what you want, and that's the secret of any human interaction when you think about it. A good marriage should work that way. Negotiating and persuading things with your teenage children, that's my reality, is also, a tricky thing, but that's about creative compromise. And it's about not giving ground. It's not about capitulation, because that's me wrestling you into the dirt. And it's not about, it's seduction, I suppose, isn't it? It's just falling in love with one another and the idea that this could be magic between us. That's the best kind of sales, anyway. That's the kind of sales pitch that I train people to do.
Yeah, and then it triggers into, if it's done well and effectively, it's about building trust and establishing a long-term relationship. I mean, I've never framed it thus, but I think that for me makes absolute sense, isn't it? You're basically, it's courting. You're basically courting, and then basically moving into this long-term relationship of mutual trust. And actually, it should be a joyous occasion, because having the opportunity to do that with a crowd of people is something that, as the European Business Aircraft Association have found, is something that is infectious and is contagious and is worth progressing, because it's important and it delivers value for everybody.
And it is about value delivery, actually. I'm really glad you've used that phrase, because it's not wrestling people into the dirt and making them do things and buy things they don't want. It's about standing in the light of your own truth. And I think there's nothing more powerful than that. And people are hugely addicted to what that looks like. The authentic self is sometimes raw and vulnerable. It's not always the thrusting salesperson. Sometimes it is about that back foot. It's about stepping back and just listening and having that lovely stillness, which is so important in any kind of human interaction. You learn so much every day from just sitting back, don't you, and observing human behaviour.
It's extremely rewarding, I think, because it's allowing other people to breathe and other people to communicate and to gain that knowledge is just such a gift. Where are you going to take this next? We should do another podcast, I think, to cover the next phase. Should we do that? I think that would be great.
It would be great. I mean, I suppose I always start with the end in mind. As a mission, and that's very different to what you do for a living, isn't it? As a mission, I want to be instrumental in helping aviation to understand the importance and significance and unique offer that disabled people can make to the business. I would like to prove, and not because it's a dare, but I'd like to prove that it's perfectly possible for someone like me, who is a pilot, to fly all sorts of different planes. So I'm not the problem. I've got the qualification. The planes are the problem. So, just working on cockpit configuration of the future. I know mods are hugely expensive and long-winded and to bring into being. I'm not unaware of that. But it would be wonderful to think that, if I was 8 months pregnant or I'd dislocated my elbow while playing squash, on a return flight from Frankfurt to Heathrow, that the cockpit would be kind to me and I could still do that. Because I say this in my professional speaking, we're only ever temporarily able-bodied. I had never, ever considered my life as a person who would lose the use of their right arm. And we use it as a phrase all the time, don't we? I'd give my right arm for that. I promise you wouldn't. And when the world is a two-handed, right-hand dominant world, and suddenly you are a left-handed, one-handed individual trying to find solutions to how you find a toilet roll when you go into a so-called disabled toilet, or how you even open the door when it's a double lock, or how you open a packet of cheese or a pint of milk, everything, or put the numbers in at the car wash because the window's there, and the machine is there, but my hand isn't available to do that. So all of these little things. I would just like to be very, very instrumental in helping the world to be ready for the huge numbers of us who are going to be disabled in futurity. We're an ageing population, and the world isn't ready for anything like the numbers of us that are going to hit the marketplace as people who can't do what we used to do. So I want to be really instrumental, particularly for passengers who get on planes. I've got lots of friends who are with complex disabilities who need powered wheelchairs, getting them on and off planes or getting them onto planes of any sort so that they can have equality of leisure opportunity, let alone, equality of employment opportunity. That would be great. I'd love for every child in a wheelchair to be able to access a school in its own community rather than sometimes having to cross innumerable geographical barriers in order to be able to go to a school where it can actually roll in through the door. And that's horrifying to hear those stories, as I do, on a weekly basis, of children being separated from childhood friends because the school can't accept them. There's a step or there's a physical barrier. This shouldn't really be the world we're living in. I'm confident, actually, there's enough money to go around. We're just not spending it in the right places.
I think you're absolutely right. And it's one we should follow up. Are you happy to come back and we'll do another podcast?
That'll be lovely.
Because there's so much to unpack here. I think we started, particularly how you play a good bottom B flat on a sax. So Charlotte, listen, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much. You're happy to come back. We'll unpack some more about your life and your mission, which I think will resonate with everybody who's listening and watching. So fantastic. Thank you so much for talking to the Just Great People podcast. We'll see you very soon.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you very much for your time.
Great. Thanks, Charlotte. So that's it for today's Just Great People podcast from the Success Consultancy. We hope and trust you've enjoyed it. Please join us next time and please do remember to subscribe. Thanks for joining us.